when I prepared that meeting of the process meeting of, we plan to have another type of talk with one of my colleagues at HP. But we had some issues that it will not allow us to deliver exactly that talk, so I will jump on another slightly similar topic around governance for free and open source software. The goal is to see what is, so we have discussed about packaging issues around software with regards to distributions, how good to be a good upstream versus a good downstream, how to try to centralize some information that would make life easier for upstream to know dependencies, for example, of the software. We have covered those types of topics. One aspect which has not yet been covered is the licensing part of free software. So I will discuss about what we've done inside HP to try to solve those licensing issues and improve the licensing landscape as much as we could. And the next speaker after me from Susie will also cover some copyright assignment aspects around software projects. And he will finish by talking about the LibreOffice and packaging format on this project. Okay, so just briefly to introduce myself, my name is Bruno Kornek. I'm working for HP. I'm an open source and Linux architect, technology architect. I'm living in France, as you can guess with my accent. And I came down under to present to you this topic. I'm doing different activities in the open source community. I'm leading some projects, so I know the upstream aspects, leading MondoRescue and Project Builder. I'm also packaging software for distributions such as Mageia and Mandriva. So I also know the other side of the coin and the problems that we can have when we are packaging software. And I'm interested by governance as well, so we will talk about that aspect right now. So first, a bit of ancient Greek. You know, Greece has been very popular recently in the press for economical problems, but they are really at the heart of our languages in the past. So the first thing to think about is when we are naming software is where does it come from? And the name of FLOSSology is coming from two ancient Greek words. The first one is FLOSS, written in ancient Greek like that, which means free and open source software in Greek. And the second word is logos, which means science, study. So FLOSSology means the study of free and open source software. Simple as that. What is the goal of the tool? So HP has realized, you know, we are a very large company and we have a large usage of free software. We use it internally as part of our IT environment to help us in different activities. We use it as part of some of our products. We integrate some software components inside some of our commercially sold solutions. So we need to be very cautious about what type of components we integrate, how we integrate them, do we respect the licenses, is there any problem that we should look at, is there any redistribution aspect that we need to take care of, how to provide, for example, access to the source code when we are dealing with GPL software, etc., etc. And in order to help us, as the size of open source software was increasing internally in our usage and in our products, we would not be able to manipulate those type of information manually anymore. Even dedicating resources to that was not sufficient. So at one moment in time, it became obvious that we had to tool ourselves in order to help us in the analysis of those licenses and being sure that we were doing the right stuff with the right software. So the creation of FLOSSology has been decided in order to reduce licensing related issues for us, and as it was really something very useful for everybody, we also open source it as a tool in order for other people to be able to have access to the same level of information and do the analysis themselves on their part of software that we're using. So FLOSSology is a framework, in fact, in which you can develop information around the licensing about the software that you are analyzing. it could do many other stuff. For now, it's concentrating on license analysis. It does that by taking code which is existing, so you need to have access to the source code. It processes it, saves the results in a database, and gives you a user interface web-based front end in order to navigate through those results and have more information about the licensing of your software and the real licensing of your software, not the licensing of your software. So it's not because the project is saying I'm GPLv2 on its website that it's completely true. If you dig into the software, into the source code, you may find a large set of different licenses used for different parts of the software, which may evolve also during time. So that's also an activity that you need to pass regularly in order to be sure that you are up to date with regard to licensing information. So FLOSSology is a tool which has been adopted by the Linux Foundation as part of its working group around compliance for FLOSS, in all the activities they have around FLOSS compliance, such as, for example, they have an initiative around SPDX for describing a single format to explain the licenses of the software, and I will detail a bit that later on. So as part of the initiative, FLOSSology is one of the tools which has been recognized as very useful by the Linux Foundation and is supported by it. So how does the tool work? So it works mainly about, so it's as we are in the mini conf around cross distribution, the way we are using it is either with upstream code or with distribution code. And it's important for us because we are, for example, reselling distributions to customers. We also have to assess those distributions and the licenses information of those distributions. It has been more true in the past maybe that it is today, because now distributions themselves are also using FLOSSology as a tool as part of their build process, or some forges are using it as part of their build environment in order to integrate the license analysis in the build process, in the overall production of the software. But in the past it was even more critical to be sure that when we were selling one version of a distribution to a customer, we were really having all the rights to do that correctly without violating any license agreement presented in the distribution. So back to the needs it created for the tool is we want to be able to pass to the tool whatever format that our upstream people are giving to us, which could be a compressed tar file for a pure upstream project up to a DVD ISO image for a full distribution. We want to be able to put all that inside FLOSSology, up to the tool to decompress, loop back mount, whatever it has to do in order to have access to the source code contained on the container that we are manipulating and performing the analysis. So the goal is really to dig into the source code, find all matches of license content, which could be extensive licenses, such as a full license, GPL license attached to a free software component, or which could be just a sentence mentioning this software is released under BSD, or just one file in the README. You may have one line describing that the software is released under the BSD license. So it could be very simple, it could be very complex. We should rely on our own internal database of existing licenses, known licenses, against which we are matching, and the matching is done in a clever way to find license references inside the source code in order to give a probability, a plausibility of matching between the license that we have in our database and the licenses which are referenced in the source code. So the engine behind that type of work is called NUMAS. That's what is mentioned at the back of the slide. Nomos was not part of the first delivery of the Fossology tool when we released the tool under an open source license ourselves. It had some constraints that would not allow us to release it as an open source tool first. So we had another engine, and since version 1 or 2, if I remember correctly, Nomos has been integrated inside the standard Fossology build. So now you have all the power and the same speed of analysis that what we had internally up to the latest version, thanks to this analyzing tool. So the process is really simple. You submit code to Fossology. There is a web interface. You can upload software. You can give a reference to a file. You can browse your hard drives and upload a package that you have downloaded from somewhere. You can give a URL. You can give as I said, a tar file, a zip file, a jar file, an ISO file, whatever you have at hand. It will be able to unpack it and find the source code in it and perform the analysis. And then you choose between a certain number. So you give some metadata around it to be able to navigate through the user interface more easily. And then you have a certain number of phases of analysis that you can trigger inside Fossology. The major one being the Nomos license analysis. But you may also want to find some other metadata information, such as copyright, email, URL analysis, MIME types association, and some headers, package headers information. If you are, for example, uploading an RPM or a DEB package directly inside Fossology, it will be able to do the analysis of the header of the package format and get those information, store them, and allow you to browse through that. So multiple analyses could be performed, and you have to wait. So the process is put in a queue. You may have dozens of users interacting with a single Fossology instance. It manages different users access, and it manages a queue of processes. So you wait for your analysis. You have different information of the jobs being performed by Fossology. You can know where you are and what has been done by the tool. So going from unpacking the software up to passing the Nomos license analyses, the bucket stuff, also copyright stuff, MIME types, etc. So all the phases are viewable by the user. And of course, when it's a small job, like just an upstream 1 megabytes type of project, it's easy and quick. When you pass a full DVD inside the tool, it can take some time before the analysis is completely done. And then at the end, well, you enjoy the results. So you navigate through the web interface, and you have information about what the tool has found in terms of licensing available inside your software. So here I use my own project as an entry point for analyzing the licenses in it. And if you click on certain licenses you are interested with, then you have the references which are highlighted on the right-hand side, so you know that the GPL v2 Plus license has been found into a certain number of files, which correspond in fact to the AutoConf here generation inside my project. And you see a certain number of licenses, so even if the Mondo Rescue project itself is licensed under the GPL v2, you can see that when you look at it, really, what you have in it is a large set of different licenses. Not only GPL v2 or later. You have some documentation, so you have GFDL mentioned, you have some MIT stuff, you have some public domain stuff. Not a lot of files. Most of the files are without any license found. And most of the other where a license has been found are related to FSF or GPL. So it's pretty clean, I would say, except that at one moment in time I removed some of the headers of the files which were obsolete, and I did not put again back a license plate in all of the files as well. There are so many with no license found, and that's something I need to do. Clearly, Fossology tells me you have not done a good job identifying each of your source file and providing a license inside your source file to make life easier for people wanting to use your software. So if we look at the architecture of the tool itself behind the scene, so you have seen there is a web user interface. You also have some command line interface tool that you can use to trigger the analysis. and if you want to automate a certain number of tasks. Those tools are interacting with one database which contains all the information related to the processing, the workflow around FLOSSology, so managing the queue. There is a scheduler, a job scheduler, which relies on that queue and process, launch the different agents which are here at their turn on the software itself to perform the actions. So each action is performed by one agent. There is one agent like Nomos for the license analysis, one agent for the MIME type, one agent for etc. etc. And those agents are interacting with the repository for storing all the metadata information, and with the file system to have access to the exact source code or the tar file or the packages, ISO images that you have put on it. So that's the way it's working with the, in terms of architecture, internally inside the tool. So if you want to, so FLOSSology is available today back, and I have a slide on that, as a public instance. So if you want to test it, it's very easy. You can request for an account and try it. If you want to have your own FLOSSology instance internally, if you are a corporation which is large enough to worry about license analysis inside your environment, you may want to host your own FLOSSology instance, and for that you have to respect a certain number of requirements. It runs on a Linux system because it's using some of the kernel facilities such as loopback mounting and stuff like that. Apache Web Server, PHP 5, PostgreSQL, at least 8.3, a certain number of libraries available to do with MIME type analysis, extraction of data, and a lot of commands to, again, deal with the extraction of the different formats which are supported by the tool. You need a lot of disk space and a lot of CPU resources because that analysis is not easy from a CPU perspective, because you are performing all those uncompressing stuff to do the analysis of the software, and then there is the license analyzing tool which is comparing a lot of stuff. So it takes quite a lot of resources. However, if you have small packages that you just want to check from time to time, it's easy to run it in a VM. I made a lab based on a VM recently, and it's running perfectly fine. Just allocate enough RAM to the VM to not have any problem. So so that image is from the original FLOSSology presentation that I continue to modify across time. This is Bob Gobi, who is the architect around FLOSSology, presentation of how conflicts were solved in the past. And I keep it because I like it, and I like Middle Ages myself. So I'm singing music from the Middle Ages, which has nothing to do with that, even if I speak sometime in the music of wars and stuff like that. So yeah, conflicts were solved with quite drastic solutions in the past. Today, when you have conflicts, you end up having articles in the press, on the web, saying that you have violated a license, which is another type of conflict between companies. And really the goal is to avoid to be mentioned in such type of websites or reports as a company. I mean, there is no way, if you are doing your job correctly with regard to license, to the respect of licenses and the duties that you have mentioned in the license, there is no reason that why you would end up be mentioned on such a website. However, there are still people not reading correctly the license, not having the right attorneys or lawyers working for them and explaining to them what they need to do in order to be in accordance with what the license is providing to them. So FLOSSology is one of the tools, not the only one, but one of the tools that allows you to avoid ending up being shown by people saying you have done bad things with software you should not have done. You have not respected the constraints of the license. The tool itself has evolved during time quite a lot. So the first release has been in 2007. And at that time there was no specific, so no NOMAS agent. It was quite internal version status which was put outside to give an idea of what we were doing with that. A certain number of evolutions throughout the years. The major version, I think the version which allowed the project to really take off was the 1.2 3 years ago, due to the NOMAS license kernel, which was really much quicker than what we had before, so allowing much more analysis of software for large customers. It was really wanted. Buckets, the notion of buckets, I will detail it later on, which allows you to group licenses together to make, for example, you want to have good licenses and bad licenses identified, and an easy way for your lawyers to get that information out of the analysis. New version 2.0 was a new scheduler, some independence model, re-architecturing of the software to make it easier to write plugins for the FLOSSology in the future. And now we are at 2.1 currently. So the project is getting new release every now and then when it's ready and when there is enough material to publish it. So I have a certain number of screenshots to give you an idea of what type of other information you can get out of FLOSSology. So some metadata information around the software that you are analyzing. So the checksums are quite important because that's one way FLOSSology itself is trying to match different deliveries of similar software between different distributions, for example. So when we are analyzing Fedora on one hand, Debian on the other hand, there are a lot of commonalities between those two distributions inside with the different versions which are similar between the different products incorporated into the distributions. So it's not useful to reanalyze something which has already been analyzed. So if it's the same checksum, it's 99% of the time sure that it's the same software, so we can benefit from the analysis made by others. It's also a way for example, companies to exchange. If they trust themselves about one analysis which has been done on a software, it's a way for them to exchange about that software has been analyzed on our side. It gives that type of results. You can trust us, and that's all the metadata information relating to that piece of software we analyzed. As I said, buckets are quite interesting, allowing you to group licenses in pools that will allow you to, and allow your lawyers most of the time to easily have a great idea on what are the problematic license from their point of view. And their point of view may be a non-technical point of view, of course, and also may not be related to what you would thought about. So it's not necessarily GPL versus non-GPL. It could be the fact that some piece of software have no license at all. That could be a very big problem, and in fact, in general, it is a big problem. So those people tend to identify where there could be problems. No license at all is a problem. Having the knowledge of which part of the software is licensed under the GPL gives them indication on what they need to release in terms of software to the outside to be compliant with the license, for example, if there is redistribution, etc., etc. So grouping the licenses is quite important for people in order to help them in the analysis. Since some more recent version, you have the possibility to do comparison between two deliveries of software. So it's most meaningful when you compare two versions, for example, of the same software, in order to understand what has changed in the new delivery of that software with regard to licenses. So you want to be able to say, okay, CPIO in 2.9 and CPIO in 2.11, I really want to have an idea of what has changed. And what has changed here is underlined, for example, at the bottom. There are some components which have changed. You can drill down into, if you click on the tar file, you will have an explosion of what is in the tar file, same on the other side, and you will be able to compare side by side the two versions of set of licenses associated to the software itself. So 2.0 was really an important version due to the restructuration internally, the possibility to have plugins added more easily to the tool. What is really important in terms of work right now is around SPDX, and for this mini-conf, that's one of the topics which is really important. SPDX is a working group of the Linux Foundation. which has been started 3 years ago, if I remember correctly. The goal of the SPDX working group is to create a parsable, machine parsable format, so XML-based, which will allow you to describe each file being part of the delivery of a software. And each file will be described with a certain number of information, the most important one being the type of license associated to each of those files. So you can have, if you have an SPDX description of your software, and we were mentioning another format for upgrading software earlier in the previous conference from Vidal and Tom. The goal of SPDX is exactly the same as the other format, but for licensing purposes. And the goal is to help, so sharing license information between entities. So again, an entity which has done an SPDX analysis of a component, of a piece of software, will be able to sign off this analysis, and some other company which rely and trust that lawyer about his analysis will be able to reuse the results directly. So the goal is to minimize the risks, is to minimize the impact of the study of licenses on top of the software, and really to share license and component information between companies, between consumer of open source software. So this SPDX format is now in version 2. something, as published by the Linux Foundation. It's still mostly a paperwork or a filework right now. There are some tools, some editors of the SPDX format which allows you to make it easier to describe what is in SPDX, in an SPDX syntax, the content of a piece of software. And there is also an add-on which is being developed for Fossology to add support, SPDX support to Fossology directly. Other areas of investigation for Fossology in the future are possibility to do binary analysis or dependency analysis as well, because the framework is here. It's just a matter of adding some agents to perform more activity on the software. Once the software is uploaded, it's easy to add content to the analysis. So here is a copy of a screen which shows you how could be the interface between Fossology and SPDX. So this plugin development is led by the University of Nebraska, and the goal is really to integrate the generation of an SPDX format directly out of the analysis made by Fossology. So instead of providing just a user interface, the web user interface and license information such as you have seen before, Fossology will get a button and say, generate SPDX format for me, and it will be able to generate the XML file format compliant with SPDX that will describe precisely in the SPDX format the content of the software. And you will be able to, the person in charge of the analysis will be able to validate the SPDX description and join that SPDX description, share it with other companies, etc., or move it upstream. One of the goals, again, of those file format is that upstream project be interested by hosting the information, maybe not maintaining the information themselves, but at least hosting the major SPDX file, describing the whole tree of files that they're delivering, and having some of the lawyers signing the SPDX format to give a proof that the analysis is correct in their mind. So you could do a lot of other stuff with Fossology. And this is an open source project, so the project is really welcoming contributions. So if you have any idea, any spare time to work on those topics, feel free to contact Bob Gobi. We'll be very happy to give you all the entry points that you can imagine inside the tool in order to develop new agents or new plugins so that you can extend the possibility of the tool. Myself, I have always the idea to work around code dependencies. As Fossology is doing the analysis of the source code, it could do it could store in the database metadata around code analysis, such as system calls, for example. I still have customers very interested by porting software to Linux and being able to use Fossology to parse their developed code internally, analyzing on your original operating system. You reference those type of systems calls, which are could be X11 system calls, Oracle system calls, or whatever. And then finding in a matrix possibility to say, okay, those breaks that you were using on operating system A are also available on operating system B, or you have that gap between those two operating systems. There is some system call missing, etc. So that's the type of activity you can do very easily with Fossology, because framework is here, the environment is there, the workflow is there. You just need to add the right parser at the right level to make the tool provide more services for you. So the same University of Nebraska is also, to make a long story short, there was a public Fossology instance at one moment in time which disappeared, which has now reappeared at the URL which is mentioned here. So you can have an account on this Fossology instance. You can upload your software there. You can analyze your software and get information around the licenses that you have in your software and put yourself more in compliance with what you would expect. So remove maybe some of the missing licenses that you have seen in my software, for example. So since last August, during Linux.conf in San Diego, Paul Montre announced the availability of that Fossology instance, and so it's available. You can upload your software there and use it and start sharing information about free software. The goal of, well, the problem of having a public instance like that is there is always a possibility that some people misuse the software. So try to find missing or conflicting license information in a piece of software and benefit from that to create legal issues with the upstream project. That's precisely not the goal of Fossology. The goal of Fossology is to solve those. So trying to work in advance to identify the potential problems and work with upstream to solve them. And it's less critical to have that instance today available, because that's since the last 10 years we have worked with Fossology. We have passed tons of software throughout Fossology, and all the problems that we have seen with license coherency, lack of license, problematic license on some breaks, etc. We have already reported all those problems upstream, and they have always been fixed very easily by the projects themselves. So there are not a lot of issues today remaining, in our opinion, that would make that type of public availability a real potential problem for license analysis. Okay, so just because I'm working for HP and I'm paid by HP to be here, I need to make some advertisement. So HP is doing that for two reasons. One reason is to be in compliance ourselves internally, so to be sure that what we are doing with free software is the right stuff and that we don't mess up with it. We release a tool under a GPL license itself, so we believe that we can help the whole ecosystem to improve its knowledge around licensing management and have both upstream project and distributions improve their capabilities to deal with licenses. However, we also think that some customers would like to be helped in their governance aspects around open source consumption. And we have a certain number of services that we can deliver to customers to help them with regard to setting up a governance policy manual, setting up, having an assessment of what is their current usage, setting up a Fossology instance internally, helping them dealing with all the licensing problems that it could have due to history or whatever. So HP is doing that on top of what we are doing on a more pure open source aspect, and we are living also from services, so that's also part of stuff we can deliver to customers. You have here a certain number of links which are available for you to have more information around fossology. There are a certain number of quite prominent fossology users, so except ourselves, Alcatel-Lucent, there are a lot of telco customers very interested by that type of tool because those guys, like us, are integrating a lot of open source components inside their commercial products. And so they need to be very clean in the way they are using open source. Meaning, for example, that they don't want like links to be pointed at integrated in BusyBox and not distributing the sources of BusyBox correctly. So Alcatel-Lucent, Siemens, they all have telecommunication activities and they are all following very precisely fossology. Some other users, the French National Research Center or the RW2 Forge, they have integrated fossology as part of their Forge environment. So each project which is built and uses the service of the Forge to get the version control system, the build system, they also have a license analysis tool part of the environment for free. And they pass all their software through fossology to be sure that they are compliant in terms of licenses as well. So they have their own rules and they have set up the tool as part of the normal build environment for all the projects that are hosting. So OW2 is an open source consortium. INRIA is a public research center in France which is producing both open source and commercial software. So for them it was quite crucial to be able to identify very precisely where were open source components used as part of the delivery they were making around their software. That's it for this presentation on my side. We have 5 remaining minutes to take questions on your side, if you have some. Yes, so this time we'll show you the mic.
G'day. The issue of licensing and the licensing metadata is very interesting, and a number of other places are trying to aggregate it. Debian, for example, does a lot of work with their copyright files. Fedora has information has to go into the RPM file about the license. Is there, this looks like a third set of that, are the license names and short and tags and things at least compatible between these? Because I know there was issues between Debian and Fedora when they were starting to standardise that I'm upstream for Samba, by the way, so we were thinking trying to host that kind of information properly within our stuff, make it clear what bits were what. So we want to make our licenses clear because bits of Samba are under different licenses, some GPL, some LGPL. So we've got good interest in it, but I don't want to keep 3 different standards for license names.
No. So part of the SPDX effort, there is an agreement on license names and shortcuts names and long names as well. So SPDX format and the first delivery of the SPDX working group has been identifying a set of licenses first, and those licenses for each of them having a short tag and a long name. And normally today I think both Debian and Fedora are using this list.
Good.
As part of, so for example so I'm less familiar with the dev stuff, but they have the same mechanism. In the spec format you have a license tag, and the license tag on the right hand side you use a tag for the license. That tag now is part of, is coming from SPDX. And
Excellent.
Same thing for Debian, they're working on that. So there is convergence. The problem is that you cannot converge at the same speed as you would like because there is history. Those distributions have a long history behind themselves and a user base which is large, so they cannot disrupt that necessarily the way they want. So you need to make a change in the format of the spec file or in the format of the control file for Debian to be able to make that adaptation. But that has been done. And now they have also in Debian, they have developed some tools to control with regard to SPDX the nature of the control file. So there is work being done around those. Yeah.
Oh, excellent, excellent. I'm so glad because I just saw the start of it when Fedora and Debian were both starting, well, Debian's up for ages, but Fedora was starting their license list and noticing that it was different. I'm glad things got better.
No, and the fact that which improved that is that most of the lawyers or people interested by legal aspect and side distributions are also looking very closely at SPDX or member of the mailing list. They are exchanging around those topics. So It takes a bit of time. It's not as quick as every person would like it to be, but yeah.
That's the list.
That's the list of licenses which are referenced by SPDX. So it's going in a good direction. I think there is much more progress on the licensing information part than what we have on the component naming part, for example. We are way behind on that area, and because there are also much more differences between the distributions, so it makes stuff more complex. The granularity is not the same between different distributions. Here it's much easier to agree a GPL v2 license, a GPL v2 license. That one is easy. A GPL plus, then with some exclusion clauses, and then it becomes a bit more complex. And you may find that the list is quite long because on top of the 60, 70 licenses identified by the OSI, you have all the exclusion clause, all the specificities, which makes that it doubles, triples, quadruples very rapidly due to those stuff. And people had to agree on the tag name and the license name and content. And some lawyers disagree between themselves on the even the names of such stuff. So, but definitely. Just last one.
One more quick question.
Just a quick answer question.
Okay.
You mentioned some organization using directly in a forge.
Yeah.
Do you know if there are forges like, say, GitHub, who have thought about using FLOSS? For instance, they go with free hosting of open source apps, whereas they've got a specific commercial contracting option for hosting.
It was a GForge fork. They are using, in fact, they have one of their projects inside of W2 which is making Forge. So they are using that Forge, and part of that Forge, which is the GForge fork, they are using, because they have integrated FLOSS as part of the process, of the workflow process. So you have the version control system, you extract information, you build your software, you have the build environment, and then you check the licenses, and then you publish the software. So all those phases have been very well defined and controlled. And
Did you know GitHub is doing this? Or
I don't know, I never heard about GitHub doing that kind of stuff. Not up to now. And I can take a last remaining question while the next speaker